My name is Liam Miller. I'm 21, a junior in college. To my roommates, I'm painfully wholesome, the kind of guy who still blushes when he talks to a girl. I thought my world would always be just code and basketball, predictable but stable. That is, until one completely unexpected evening. I just stepped out of the shower, a towel wrapped loosely around my waist, still dripping, when I was cornered by an uninvited guest. She was my older sister's best friend, the legendary Victoria Vance, the impossibly beautiful, notoriously icy CEO of a media empire. Her eyes roamed over my body without a hint of shame. She even let out a soft laugh, her words hitting me like a physical blow. "So innocent? I like that. I think I'll keep you." In that moment, I knew my simple college life was about to be turned completely upside down. And just like that, I was thrown into a heart-pounding, chaotic romance with my sister's domineering best friend. What was I supposed to do? That day, I just finished a pickup game, my clothes soaked with sweat. I was in a hurry to get back to my small off-campus apartment for a shower. It was a little one-bedroom I'd managed to afford with money from a part-time gig. It wasn't much, but it was mine. The hot water sluiced over me, and I closed my eyes, savoring the moment of peace. Suddenly, I heard a faint noise from outside the bathroom. I cut the water, listening intently. Silence. Probably just the neighbors, I mumbled to myself, turning the shower back on. 15 minutes later, I turned off the tap and reached for the towel on the rack. It was empty. I remembered then that I'd tossed all my towels into the laundry that morning. "Damn it," I muttered, grabbing an old white bathrobe from the back of the door and tying it loosely around my waist. I pushed open the bathroom door, a cloud of steam billowing out ahead of me. Running a hand through my wet hair, I headed toward the kitchen for a glass of water, my head down. Droplets trickled from the ends of my hair, down my neck, and into the hollow of my collarbone. I was wondering what to do for dinner when I looked up and froze. My sister wasn't alone. Chloe, my actual sister, was standing at the fridge grabbing a couple of sodas, completely unfazed by the situation. And on my couch, lounging as if she owned the place, was a woman I had never seen before. She was sunk into the cushions, her posture as languid and self-assured as a cat sunning itself. She wore a long, deep purple silk dress that shimmered like liquid under the lamplight, tracing a breathtaking silhouette. Her waist was impossibly small, and below the hem of her dress, a pair of long legs were casually crossed, sheathed in black stockings with a delicate, almost invisible pattern. On her feet were a pair of black heels with instantly recognizable red soles. That splash of crimson made my eyes ache. Hearing me, she slowly lifted her head. A cascade of perfectly styled brunette waves fell over her shoulder. Her makeup was flawless, utterly impeccable. But the most lethal detail was the tiny beauty mark just below the corner of her eye. It transformed her from merely beautiful into a priceless work of art. My heart hammered against my ribs. "Hey, look who's finished," Chloe said, turning around. Her tone was as casual as if she were introducing a new brand of cereal. "This is my best friend, Victoria." Victoria's gaze slid over me, unhurried and appraising. It traveled from my wet hair down to my bare calves, missing nothing. I felt a hot flush creep up my neck, and I instinctively tightened the knot on my bathrobe. Chloe, what are you doing here?" I stammered, my eyes darting to the front door, calculating the distance to my bedroom. "Mom sent a care package from home, so I dropped it off. Didn't know you'd be in the shower," Chloe said with a grin. I ran into Victoria downstairs and invited her up. Victoria finally spoke, her voice a low, magnetic hum. "Chloe, you never told me you had such a cute little brother." She drew out the word cute, her eyes lingering on me like a gourmet, savoring a delicacy. The glass of water in my hand trembled. "I am just going to go get changed," I mumbled, moving stiffly toward my bedroom. I had almost reached the doorknob when Victoria's voice stopped me again. "What's the rush? It's not like I've never seen a man before." I froze, turning to stare at her in disbelief. She just smiled that lazy smile, picked up a coffee mug from the table, and took a delicate sip, leaving a perfect red lipstick stain on the rim. Chloe finally took pity on me. "Victoria, stop teasing him. He's shy." Victoria let out a soft laugh, set down her mug, and rose to her feet. The click of her heels on the hardwood floor was unnervingly loud in the small apartment. each step seeming to land in time with my frantic heartbeat. She stopped just inches away from me, tilting her head up to look at me as I was a good half-foot taller. From this close, I could smell her perfume, a subtle, intoxicating blend of what might have been cedar and amber, elegant, but with an aggressive edge. "Liam, is it?" she said, extending a hand. Her nails were perfectly manicured, painted the same searing red as the soles of her shoes. "A pleasure to meet you." I hesitated for a second before taking her hand. Her grip was firm and warm, not like any girl's I'd ever held before. "Why, yeah, you too." Before I could finish, the knot on my bathrobe suddenly came undone. Time seemed to freeze. I fumbled desperately to catch the front of the robe as the glass of water slipped from my other hand, shattering on the floor with a loud crash. Victoria didn't even flinch. Her gaze remained fixed on me, a slow, knowing smile spreading across her lips. "Well," she said, one perfectly shaped eyebrow raised. "Looks like my timing was perfect." I yanked the robe closed and practically dove into my bedroom, slamming the door shut. I leaned against it, gasping for air, my heart threatening to burst through my chest. I could hear their voices through the door. "You went too far. Look how you scared him," my sister said. I was just appreciating the view. Victoria's voice was laced with amusement. "You never told me your brother was so captivating. He's 21. He's just a kid. He certainly doesn't look like one." I slid down to the floor, burying my burning face in my knees. What was happening? In my 21 years, I had never encountered a woman so direct, so completely overwhelming. A few minutes later, after changing into a t-shirt and jeans and taking several deep breaths, I finally worked up the courage to open the door. In the living room, Chloe was cleaning up the broken glass. Victoria was back on the couch, her legs crossed elegantly, as if nothing had happened. "Sorry about the glass," I said quietly. "Don't worry about it. I've been meaning to get you a new set of glasses anyway," Chloe said, winking at me. "Come on, Victoria wants to get to know you." I cautiously chose the armchair farthest away from Victoria. She seemed unfazed by my defensive posture, leaning forward slightly, resting her elbows on her knees and cupping her chin in her hands as she studied me. "So, Liam, you're in college?" she asked. I nodded. "NYU. Computer science, junior year." "A smart one," she said approvingly. "Do you play basketball? You look like you're in good shape." I felt my face heat up again. "Sometimes. And sometimes is enough to get a six-pack," she countered, an eyebrow raised. "You must be very gifted." Chloe finally chimed in. "Victoria is the CEO of Stellar Media Group, a total powerhouse." I'd heard of Stellar Media. It was one of the biggest advertising firms in the city, with a roster of A-list clients. I never would have guessed that this woman, who couldn't be more than 27 or 28, was its CEO. "Wow," I said lamely, having no idea how to talk to someone so successful. Victoria smiled and pulled a business card from her purse, holding it out to me. "We're always in need of IT support. If you're interested in a summer internship, give me a call." I took the card. It was thick, expensive cardstock, the company logo and her contact information embossed on the surface. "Thanks," I said, "but I already have an internship lined up." It was a lie, born from a primal instinct to get away from this woman who made my pulse race. Victoria didn't look disappointed. In fact, she looked as if she could see right through me. "The offer stands if you change your mind." She stood up, smoothing down her dress. "Chloe, I have a conference call. I should get going." My sister walked her to the door. Just before she left, Victoria turned back and gave me one last look. It was the look of a predator letting its prey go, knowing it could hunt it down again whenever it pleased. "It was a pleasure meeting you, Liam," she said. "I have a feeling we'll be seeing each other again." The moment the door closed, I let out a huge breath and collapsed onto the couch. "So," Chloe said, plopping down next to me with a mischievous grin, "how does it feel to be targeted by a billionaire CEO?" "Don't even joke about that," I said, pushing her lightly. "She's just your friend. She was just being polite." "Polite?" My sister's eyebrows shot up. "Victoria Vance is never just polite. Do you have any idea how many people would kill for that business card? The fact that she gave it to you means she's genuinely interested." "Interested in what?" I asked suspiciously. "That," she said with a mysterious smile, heading for the kitchen, "is something you'll have to find out for yourself. Now, Mom sent that brisket you love. I'll heat it up for dinner." That night, I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, unable to sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Victoria's, her gaze that seemed to see right through me, and that captivating beauty mark. I picked up the business card from my nightstand, tracing the raised letters in the dark. Victoria Vance, CEO, Stellar Media Group. A person from a world completely different from my own. I have a feeling we'll be seeing each other again. Her voice echoed in my head. I shoved the card into the back of a drawer, deciding to forget the whole bizarre encounter as quickly as possible. After all, what could a regular college student like me possibly have to do with a woman that dazzling? At the time, I had no idea that Victoria's arrival was just the beginning of my world being turned completely upside down. I buried Victoria's business card at the bottom of a drawer, under a pile of programming textbooks and old notebooks. I tried to erase that awkward afternoon from my mind, but the harder you try to forget something, the more vivid it becomes. Especially that beauty mark. "Liam, pass the ball!" My roommate Jake yelled, waving his arms frantically from across the court. I snapped back to reality, realizing I'd zoned out while dribbling, almost losing the ball. I made a hurried pass, but it was intercepted. The other team scored an easy layup. "Dude, what is with you today?" Jake asked during halftime, tossing me a bottle of water. "You're completely out of it. Some girl got you tripping." I twisted the cap off and chugged half the bottle, water running down my chin onto my shirt. "Shut up. I just didn't sleep well last night." Mark, my other roommate, leaned in, lowering his voice conspiratorially. "Did you guys hear? Stellar Media is recruiting summer interns on campus." I nearly choked on my water. "Stellar Media?" "Yeah, that monster advertising firm," Mark said, his eyes wide. "The competition is going to be insane, but if you get in, that's like a golden ticket on your resume." Jake clapped me on the shoulder. "You've been looking for a good internship, right? This is your shot." I stayed quiet. The business card I'd hidden away flashed in my mind. Victoria had said to call her if I changed my mind. "I'm not applying," I said. Both of them stared at me. "Why not?" "I just have other plans," I mumbled. The truth was, I had no other plans. I just had a primal need to stay away from the woman who unsettled me so profoundly. Her gaze was too intense, her presence too overwhelming. A regular college student like me was better off staying in his own lane. 3 days later, I was walking back to my apartment with a stack of books from the library. The air was thick and heavy, that smell of damp earth that comes before a downpour. I picked up my pace, hoping to make it home before the storm hit. I was just a block away when the first fat drops of rain began to fall. Cursing under my breath, I stuffed the books inside my jacket and sprinted for the nearest shelter, a chic-looking coffee shop. A little bell chimed as I burst through the door, dripping wet, nearly colliding with a customer on her way out. "I'm so sorry," I started, then the apology died in my throat. It was Victoria. She was holding a coffee cup in one hand and her phone to her ear with the other. She was dressed in a sharply tailored white pantsuit, her hair pulled back in an elegant twist, with a few loose strands framing her neck. Our eyes met. She raised an eyebrow, said one moment into her phone, and lowered it. "We meet again, Liam," she said, her eyes taking in my soaked hair and clothes. "You look like you could use a towel." I instinctively took a step back. "It's fine. I'll leave as soon as the rain lets up." She let out a soft laugh, the beauty mark under her eyes shifting with her expression. "The rain is just getting started." She stepped aside, clearing a path into the cafe. "At the very least, let me buy you a hot coffee. Consider it an apology for my behavior the other day." I glanced around and saw that the place was packed, except for one small table for two by the window. Outside, the rain was coming down in sheets. It definitely wasn't stopping anytime soon. "Okay, an Americano, then." "Thanks," I finally conceded. We sat across from each other by the window. Rain streamed down the glass, blurring the world outside into a watercolor wash. I sat stiffly, my wet clothes clinging uncomfortably to my skin. "You should take off your jacket. It's soaked," Victoria said. I hesitated, then slipped it off. My t-shirt underneath was half damp, clinging to my chest. I noticed her gaze linger for a moment, and I immediately crossed my arms over my chest. She just smiled and flagged down a waiter, murmuring something to him. A minute later, the waiter returned with a clean, dry towel and a steaming cup of coffee. "Thanks," I said, taking the towel to dry my hair. The rich aroma of the coffee helped me relax a little. Victoria stirred her latte, asking casually, I heard Stellar had a recruitment event at your school. You didn't apply?" I looked up surprised. "How did you know?" "I'm the CEO. I know our recruitment schedule," she said with a small smile. "And I specifically checked the applicant list. Your name wasn't on it." I tightened my grip on my coffee mug. I don't know much about the advertising industry. Interns don't need to be experts. What matters is the ability to learn and adapt. She leaned forward, her voice dropping lower. "Besides, I can offer you an internal referral. You'd go straight to the final round of interviews." I was stunned. An internal referral? That was the kind of opportunity countless students dreamed of. "Why?" I couldn't help but ask. "We've only met once. Why would you do this for me?" Victoria's fingertip traced the rim of her cup. Her nails were still that same shade of crimson, a stark contrast to the white ceramic. "Because I appreciate potential," she said, her eyes fixed on my face. "And because you intrigue me." A flash of lightning split the sky, followed by a deafening clap of thunder. The lights in the coffee shop flickered, then went out completely, plunging us into near darkness. A few customers gasped. In the dim light, Victoria's features were blurred, but her eyes were still bright, staring straight at me. "Looks like a power outage," she said, her voice unnervingly clear over the sound of the rain. My heart was pounding. Being trapped in this small, rain-isolated space with her felt even more intense. I should really get going," I said, standing up and grabbing my damp jacket. Victoria didn't stop me. She simply rose gracefully to her feet. "My car is parked nearby. I can give you a ride." "No, it's okay. My apartment is close." Just as we were speaking, the cafe door swung open and a familiar figure walked in. "Liam, what are you doing here?" Chloe asked, closing her umbrella, her eyes wide with surprise as she took in the scene. My mind went completely blank. What were the odds? Victoria, however, was perfectly composed. "Chloe, what a coincidence. I just ran into Liam taking shelter from the rain. I was buying him coffee." Chloe's gaze darted between us, finally settling on my soaked clothes. "You're drenched. You're going to catch a cold." She turned to Victoria. "Thanks for looking after my little brother." "It was nothing," Victoria said with a smile. "Now that you're here, I should get back. I have work to do." She picked up her bag and walked to the door, then paused and looked back. "Liam, think about my offer. Opportunities like this don't wait around." The bell chimed again, and she disappeared into the storm. Chloe immediately slid into the seat Victoria had just vacated, her eyes shining. "Okay, spill. What just happened? What offer?" I sighed and told her about the internship referral, leaving out some of the more intense details. "Oh my God, you have to say yes," Chloe exclaimed, grabbing my arm. "An internal referral from Stellar. People would kill for that." "But I'm not sure." I hesitated. "I feel like she's paying a little too much attention to me." Chloe laughed. "You idiot. That's because she likes you. I've known Victoria for years. I've never seen her go out of her way to help anyone, let alone offer them a referral. That was exactly what I was afraid of. I had no idea what Victoria saw in me, or what she expected in return." The rain started to let up, and Chloe and I walked back to my apartment. The whole way, she kept trying to convince me to take the internship. "It's just an internship," she argued. "It's not like you're selling your soul. 3 months from now, you'll have Stella Media on your resume, and finding a job will be a breeze." Back at my place, I took a hot shower, tried to clear my head. Chloe had a point. An internship at Stellar would be a huge boost for my career. But I couldn't shake the feeling of unease. The way Victoria looked at me wasn't the way a CEO looks at a potential intern. As I was drying my hair, I made sure to check the living room for any unexpected guests before I finally relaxed. My phone screen lit up. It was a text from an unknown number. "Hope you didn't catch a cold. Give my offer some serious thought. Victoria Vance." My heart skipped a beat. How did she get my number? A second text came through immediately after. "Got your number from Chloe. Hope you don't mind." I stared at the screen, unsure how to reply. Finally, I just typed 2 words. "Thank you." That weekend, I sat in the library, flipping through a programming book without reading a single word. No matter how hard I tried to focus, my mind kept drifting back to Victoria's offer and that afternoon in the rain. On Monday afternoon, Stellar Media held a recruitment presentation in the university auditorium. I wasn't planning on going, but Jake and Mark dragged me along. "Even if you're not applying, you should at least check it out," Mark said. "I heard the CEO of Stellar is giving the speech herself." And apparently, she's gorgeous. I had a very bad feeling about this. The auditorium was packed. It seemed like half the student body had shown up. We managed to squeeze into 3 seats in the very back row. When Victoria Vance walked onto the stage, a hush fell over the crowd. She was wearing a dark blue power suit, professional yet undeniably feminine. On stage, she was confident and poised, her words demonstrating a level of intelligence and charisma that was utterly captivating. I had to admit, the professional version of her was incredibly attractive. During the Q&A session, a student asked about Stellar's company culture and hiring criteria. Victoria smiled. We value potential over experience and innovation over tradition. Sometimes, a completely fresh perspective is more valuable than established industry practices. Her gaze swept across the audience, seeming to pause for a fraction of a second. I instinctively slouched in my seat, hoping she hadn't seen me. After the presentation, the crowd began to slowly file out. I was sandwiched between my 2 excited roommates, listening to them rave about the speech. "So you have to apply," Jake said, clapping me on the back. "I'm not," I started to say, but then I saw a familiar figure standing near the exit, talking to a few students. Victoria seemed to sense my gaze and turned her head, looking directly at our group. She nodded politely to the students she was with, and then started walking straight toward us. Oh man, the CEO is coming this way," Mark whispered frantically, smoothing down his collar. Victoria stopped in front of us, her eyes landing squarely on me. "Liam, I didn't expect to see you here." My roommates stared at me, their faces a mixture of shock and awe, screaming, "Since when do you know people like this?" I was dragged here," I said honestly. Victoria smiled and turned to my roommates. "You must be Liam's friends?" Jake immediately stuck out his hand. "Jake, computer science. This is Mark. We're his roommates." Victoria shook both their hands. "Liam is a very promising talent. You should encourage him to apply for our internship program." "We're trying," Mark said eagerly, "but he's a little hesitant." Victoria raised an eyebrow at me. "Still hesitating? I thought we had that conversation already." I could feel my face burning. Under the astonished gaze of my roommates, I wanted the floor to open up and swallow me whole. "I'll think about it," I mumbled. "I hope to hear good news from you soon." Victoria took 3 business cards from her purse and handed one to each of us. "If you have any questions, you can contact me directly." As my roommate stood there, completely starstruck, she gave us a nod and walked away. The moment she was out of earshot, Jake and Mark swarmed me. "Dude, how do you know her? You guys seem pretty familiar. Spill it." I sighed. "She's my sister's friend. We've only met twice. Twice is enough to get a personal referral from a CEO?" Mark shook his head dramatically. "My man, when you get lucky, you really hit the jackpot." That night, I lay in bed, staring at the shadows of tree branches dancing on the ceiling. Victoria on stage, her easy confidence talking to my roommates, and those eyes that always seemed to find me in a crowd. My phone buzzed. It was another text from her. "Applications close on Wednesday. I look forward to seeing you at the interview." I tossed and turned until the early hours of the morning before finally making a decision. It was just an internship. What was there to be afraid of? If I passed up an opportunity like this out of fear, I knew I would regret it for the rest of my life. On Tuesday afternoon, I opened Stellar's recruitment page and filled out the application. In the section that asked, "How did you hear about this position?" I hesitated, then selected Campus Recruitment Event, leaving out any mention of the referral. The moment I clicked Submit, my heart started pounding. Less than an hour later, my phone rang. It was the number I now recognized. "I saw your application." Victoria's voice came through the line, a hint of a smile in her tone. "But you didn't use the referral channel." I gripped the phone tighter. I wanted to try on my own merit. There was a brief silence on the other end. Then she said, "I respect that. In that case, I look forward to seeing what you can do in the interview." After hanging up, I let out a long breath. Whatever the outcome, at least I'd taken the first step. But deep down, I knew this was about more than just an internship. Something had already started to shift. 3 days after submitting my application, I received an interview notification from Stellar Media Group. The email was formal and concise, scheduling my interview for Friday at 2 p.m. No special treatment, no extra attention. I was being treated just like any other applicant. That, strangely, was a relief. On Friday morning, I stood in front of my closet, paralyzed by indecision. A suit felt too formal, but casual clothes seemed disrespectful. I finally settled on a light blue button-down shirt and dark pants, an outfit that wasn't too casual but didn't scream trying too hard. "Got a hot date?" Jake asked, peering down from the top bunk, his voice thick with sleep. "Interview. At Stellar," I said, adjusting my collar in the mirror, my palms starting to sweat. Mark shot up in his bed. "Today? Good luck, man. If you get in, our dorm will be legendary." I managed a weak smile, though I felt anything but confident. Even though I'd passed the resume screening, I knew my chances were slim against so many qualified candidates. I arrived at the Stellar Media building at 1:30, a half hour early. The receptionist directed me to a waiting area where a dozen other applicants were already seated, all of them dressed to impress, their faces tight with anxiety. I found a seat in the corner and quietly sized up the competition. Some clutched thick portfolios, others were frantically reviewing notes, and a few were quietly rehearsing their self-introductions. In comparison, all I had was a single copy of my resume and a head full of doubt. Next, Liam Miller. Hearing my name, I took a deep breath and followed the HR representative into the interview room. 3 interviewers sat behind a long table. The chair in the middle was empty. I relaxed slightly. Victoria wasn't here. The interview went surprisingly well. I handled the technical questions with ease and answered the questions about my projects and experience confidently. Just as I thought it was about to wrap up, the door opened. Victoria walked in, her heels clicking a sharp rhythm on the polished floor. She wore a charcoal gray suit dress, looking elegant and authoritative. "Sorry I'm late," she said to the other interviewers, then slid gracefully into the empty middle seat. "Please continue." I felt my heart rate spike again. Her presence completely threw me off balance. The last interviewer asked, "Mr. Miller, why do you want to join Stellar Media?" The answer I had prepared suddenly felt hollow and insincere. Under Victoria's intense gaze, I decided to just tell the truth. I believe an internship is a two-way street. I'm looking for an opportunity to apply what I've learned at a top-tier company and also to see if I'm a good fit for this industry. I paused, then added, "As for why Stellar, I don't think anyone studying a media-related field would pass up the chance to learn from the best." A faint smile touched Victoria's lips. She leaned forward, lacing her fingers on the table. "If we were to give you an offer, what could you bring to our team?" It was a tough question. I thought for a moment, then answered carefully. "A new perspective. I don't have industry experience, but that also means I don't have any preconceived notions. Sometimes an outsider can see problems that an insider might overlook." Victoria nodded, her expression unreadable. She glanced down at my resume, then asked abruptly, "It says here you're proficient in data analysis?" "Yes, I've worked on several related projects." "Good." She closed the folder and looked at the other interviewers. "I have no further questions." And just like that, the interview was over. I stumbled slightly as I stood up, and Victoria's eyes immediately followed the movement. I practically fled from the room. On the way back to campus, I replayed every detail of the interview in my head. Victoria's arrival had clearly shaken me, but strangely, she hadn't asked any difficult questions. In fact, her last question had almost seemed designed to highlight one of my strengths. 3 days later, I received an offer letter via email. At the same time, a text from Victoria came through. "Congratulations. Welcome to Stellar. Report to HR at 9 a.m. on Monday." I stared at the screen, my feelings a complicated mix. I was thrilled, of course, but that nagging sense of unease was still there. Had I earned this offer because of my skills, or because of Victoria's influence? Mark and Jake insisted on celebrating. So that weekend, we went to the most popular hot pot restaurant near campus. "You're the man," Jake said, raising his glass. "Your first internship is at Stellar. You're going to be a legend in our department." Mark, his mouth full of beef, mumbled, "Don't forget about us when you're famous, man. Hook us up with a referral." I laughed and promised I would, but my mind was already on Monday and the reality of facing Victoria. This time, it wouldn't be a chance encounter at a coffee shop or a brief interview. I would be her employee, working in her company. On Monday morning, I arrived at Stellar a half hour early. The HR department was a well-oiled machine, and I was through the onboarding process in no time. I was assigned to the IT support department, primarily responsible for maintaining the company's internal systems and data analysis. My direct supervisor was a man in his early 30s named David Carter. He seemed serious but fair. He showed me around, introduced me to the team, and then handed me a stack of manuals to familiarize myself with the company systems. At lunch, I was eating alone in the cafeteria when someone sat down across from me. "How's your first day going?" I looked up and nearly choked on my food. Victoria was setting her tray down, sitting across from me as if it were the most natural thing in the world. Several nearby tables of employees shot curious glances our way. It's good. Just getting oriented," I said, my knuckles white as I gripped my fork. She elegantly picked up a piece of broccoli. "IT is on the 12th floor. My office is on the top floor. If you run into any problems, you can come directly to me." "Thank you, Ms. Vance, but I'm sure Mr. Carter will be able to help me." Victoria smiled faintly. "It's Ms. Vance at the office. You can call me Victoria when we're outside of it." She paused, her voice dropping lower. "After all, we're not exactly strangers, are we?" I felt my face heat up and quickly looked down at my plate. For the rest of the week, I barely saw Victoria. The IT department was in the sub-basement, while the executive offices were on the top floor, a world away. I started to relax and immerse myself in my work. The company's internal systems were more complex than I had anticipated, but I quickly found my rhythm. David was impressed with my learning curve, and by the second week, he started assigning me to small projects. On Thursday afternoon, David called me into his office. "Liam, we have an emergency. The conference room system on the top floor just went down, and there's a major meeting in an hour. I need you to take a look." The top floor. Victoria's floor. I grabbed my toolkit and stepped into the elevator, my heart pounding faster as the floor numbers climbed. The executive assistant showed me to the conference room, where a few other IT guys were already troubleshooting. I quickly identified the problem, a compatibility issue with the audio system. I was in the middle of debugging it when Victoria and several other executives walked in. "How much longer?" she asked, her tone cool and professional. "10 minutes, Ms. Vance," I replied, not looking up at her. It only took me 7 minutes to fix it. As I was packing up my tools, Victoria's voice came from behind me. "Liam, stay for a moment." After the other staff left, it was just the two of us in the massive conference room. She walked over to inspect the equipment, then turned to me abruptly. "Are you free tonight?" I was taken aback. "What?" "We're hosting a client reception, and the tech support guy, who was supposed to be there, just called in sick." Her tone was all business. "I need you to fill in. Your main job is to ensure all the presentation equipment runs smoothly." It sounded like a reasonable request, but I still hesitated. "I'm just an intern. I might not be familiar with." "Be at the venue at 6. The dress code is a black suit," she interrupted, handing me a card. "The address is on there. Report directly to the event manager, Ms. Wong." She didn't give me a chance to refuse. She simply turned and left the room. That evening, I stood in the corner of a lavish ballroom, dressed in my only black suit, checking the projector and sound system. Ms. Wong was a capable, middle-aged woman who was polite to me, but I could see the curiosity in her eyes. Why had the CEO personally requested an intern for such an important task? The reception started at 7. Victoria made her entrance in a stunning, wine-red evening gown, looking like a completely different person from her daytime corporate persona. She moved through the crowd with effortless grace, her smile charming, her conversation witty. The presentation segment went off without a hitch. Afterward, I breathed a sigh of relief, ready to slip away unnoticed. "Liam." Victoria's voice came through my earpiece. All staff were wearing communication devices for coordination. "Come to the backstage area." We were the only 2 people backstage. She handed me a bottle of water. "You did a great job today." "Thank you, Ms. Vance. It's my job," I replied robotically. She let out a soft laugh. "It's after hours. You don't have to be so formal." I didn't say anything, just knelt down to organize some cables. "Wait for me. I'm going to change, then I'll give you a ride back," she said, heading toward a makeshift dressing room. "That's okay. I can get back on my own." But she had already closed the door. 20 minutes later, Victoria emerged in casual clothes, her hair down and falling loosely over her shoulders. She looked much softer than usual. She drove me back to my apartment, the car filled with the faint scent of her perfume. "You're technically very skilled," she said, waiting a red light. "But in this business, technical skills aren't enough." I looked at her. "What do you mean?" "You need a more comprehensive understanding of the industry." The light turned green, and she smoothly accelerated. "Starting next week, I want you to come to my office every Wednesday afternoon. I'm going to personally teach you the business side of things." I was stunned. "Is that allowed? I'm just an intern. It's my company. I make the rules," she said, her tone calm but firm. "Besides, didn't you say you wanted to see if you were a good fit for this industry? What better way than to be mentored by the CEO herself?" The car pulled up in front of my building. I unbuckled my seatbelt, debating whether I should refuse this highly unusual arrangement. "Wednesday, 2 p.m. Top floor office," she said, leaving no room for discussion. "Good night, Liam." I stood on the sidewalk, watching her tail lights disappear into the night, my mind a tangled mess. Back in my dorm, Jake immediately pounced. "Whoa, dressed to the nines. Where were you, man?" "Company event. Tech support," I said curtly, taking off my jacket. My phone lit up. A text for Victoria. "Are you home yet?" I stared at the 3 words, a strange feeling bubbling up inside me. This level of concern was definitely outside the scope of a boss-employee relationship. "Home," I replied, then added, "Thanks for your concern, Ms. Vance." An immediate reply came back. "Just Victoria is fine. Good night." I couldn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Victoria at the reception, effortlessly commanding the room, and the elegant line of her profile in the car. On Wednesday at 2 p.m., I stood outside the top floor office, took a deep breath, and knocked. "Come in." Victoria's office was spacious and bright, with a floor-to-ceiling window that offered a panoramic view of the city. She was sitting behind her desk, signing documents. "Punctuality is a good habit," she said, looking up with a smile. The beauty mark under her eye was particularly noticeable. "Have a seat. Today, we'll start with the company's main business lines." That afternoon, she was a true professional, diligently explaining the company's business structure and industry landscape. She was professional, efficient, and didn't say or do anything out of line. I gradually started to relax, even beginning to think my previous anxieties were all in my head, until the session was over and I was about to leave. "By the way," she said suddenly, "there's an industry networking event tomorrow night. You're coming with me." My guard went up again. "Is that also part of my internship?" "Of course," she said, standing up and walking over to me. "Seeing how the top players in the industry interact will be very educational." She tilted her head slightly. "Or are you afraid of something?" Her reverse psychology always worked on me. "I'll go," I said. "What time and where?" Her smile deepened. "Wait for me after work. We'll go together." As I walked out of her office and leaned against the elevator wall, I couldn't help but sigh. I knew it was a trap, but I walked right into it anyway. And the scariest part was, I realized I didn't really want to escape. The elevator mirror reflected my face, and I saw a hint of a smile that I hadn't even realized was there. The networking event was held in the grand ballroom of a high-end hotel in the city's business district. After work, Victoria's car was already waiting downstairs. I opened the door and found she had changed into a deep blue evening gown, her hair swept up in an elegant style, with a few loose tendrils framing her neck. "Get in," she said with a small smile, gesturing to the seat beside her. The car was filled with the familiar scent of her perfume. I carefully slid in, trying not to touch the hem of her dress. "Nervous?" she asked, her eyes on my hands. I was unconsciously twisting the fabric of my pants. I immediately stopped. "A little. I'm not used to this kind of event." "Just stick with me," she said calmly. "Say less. Observe more. You'll learn a lot." The event was even more formal than I'd imagined. Under crystal chandeliers, men in tuxedos and women in gowns mingled and chatted, the air thick with the scent of perfume, champagne, and a certain kind of elite ambition. I instinctively straightened my tie, feeling my student-like awkwardness was completely out of place. The moment Victoria entered, she became the center of attention. People constantly approached her, and she navigated the conversations with ease, switching effortlessly between business talk and casual banter. I followed quietly behind her, feeling like an invisible accessory. "Victoria, who is this?" a slightly overweight, middle-aged man asked, looking me over with curiosity. Victoria smoothly looped her arm through mine. Our company's rising star, Liam. I'm showing the ropes. I felt her fingers press gently on my sleeve, the warmth seeping through the fabric. The gesture was intimate yet perfectly professional, keeping me close without being inappropriate. For the entire evening, I was her shadow. She would occasionally lean in to quietly explain the subtext of a conversation or the meaning of some industry jargon. To my surprise, with her guidance, I slowly began to relax, even managing to contribute to some of the discussions. You can go sit in the lounge area if you're tired, she murmured to me during a lull. I need to say hello to a few more people. I didn't need a break. I nodded and headed to a quiet corner. Grabbing a glass of juice, I stood by the floor-to-ceiling window, looking out at the city lights, my mind wandering. All alone, a female voice said from behind me. I turned to see a woman in her early 30s, dressed in a shimmering silver gown, a flirtatious smile on her face. Yes, just taking a break, I replied politely. I haven't seen you around before. New to the industry, she asked, stepping closer, her perfume strong. Sort of. I'm an intern. Her eyes lit up. Which company? I'm Jessica, the director at a new media firm. She handed me a business card. You have a great look. Ever considered part-time modeling? We're looking for someone with your kind of vibe. I was about to politely decline when another voice cut in. Director Lee, are you trying to poach my people? Victoria had appeared at my side, her hand resting naturally on the small of my back. Jessica's expression turned instantly awkward. Victoria, is he one of yours? I was just making small talk. Liam is one of our most promising tech talents, not a model, Victoria said. Her smile was still polite, but her eyes had turned cold. If you'll excuse us, we have to go see Mr. Wong. She gently guided me away by my back, not releasing her grip until we were out of Jessica's earshot. There are a lot of people like that in this industry. Don't just give out your contact information, she said quietly, a hint of annoyance in her voice. I was surprised to realize she seemed genuinely angry. For the rest of the evening, Victoria didn't let me out of her sight. Whenever someone tried to strike up a conversation with me, she would appear and whisk me away under some pretext. I felt both embarrassed and strangely pleased. As the event wound down, an orchestra began to play, and couples started moving to the dance floor. Do you know how to dance? Victoria asked suddenly. I shook my head honestly. Not at all. Come on, I'll teach you, she said, taking my hand without waiting for an answer. Ms. Vance, I don't think this is a good idea. I tried to pull away, but her grip was surprisingly strong. Here, I'm just Victoria, she said, looking directly into my eyes. Or are you afraid you can't learn? Reverse psychology again. I knew it was a trap, but I followed her onto the dance floor anyway. At first, I was as clumsy as a newborn deer, constantly stepping on her feet. But she was patient, quietly guiding me through the basic steps. Relax. Follow my lead, she murmured, her hand resting lightly on my shoulder, our other hands clasped together. Gradually, I found my rhythm and was able to match her movements. We swayed slowly to the gentle music, her hair occasionally brushing against my chin. See, you're a quick study, she said with a smile, the beauty mark under her eye catching the light. In that moment, I forgot who she was, forgot the gap between our worlds. All I could feel was the warmth of her hand in mine and the subtle fragrance in the air. When the music ended, I realized just how close we were standing. I quickly took a step back, but she let go of my hand gracefully, as if it had been the most ordinary dance in the world. The ride back was silent. I leaned against the window, watching the city lights blur past, my mind replaying the scene on the dance floor. You did well tonight, Victoria said suddenly. As for Jessica, ignore her offer. I turned to look at her. Why? Worried I'll jump ship. Her fingers tapped lightly on the steering wheel. That world is more complicated than you think. It's not for you. Then what do you think is for me? I couldn't help but ask. She was silent for a moment. A lot of things, she said slowly, but it will take time to discover them. The car stopped at an intersection near my apartment. I unbuckled my seatbelt, hesitating. Thanks for tonight. I learned a lot. She didn't respond, just looked at me. In the dim light of the car, I couldn't quite read her expression. There's an industry forum in Chicago next week, she said abruptly. I need an assistant to go with me. Get ready. I was stunned. I'm just an intern. For such an important event. That's exactly why you need to go. You need more exposure, she said, her tone leaving no room for argument. We leave on Thursday and come back Sunday. HR will make all the arrangements. I wanted to say more, but she had already turned to face forward. Good night, Liam. I couldn't sleep that night. I lay in bed, my mind racing, replaying the events of the past few days. Victoria's behavior was a confusing mix of professional mentorship and personal interest. And the scariest part was, I wasn't sure I wanted it to stop. The next day at work, David called me into his office. I hear you're going to Chicago with Ms. Vance? He asked, his expression complicated. I nodded. She said she needs an assistant. David looked like he wanted to say more, but in the end, he just said, take care of Ms. Vance, and take care of yourself. If you need anything, call me. I felt like there was a hidden meaning in his words, but I didn't press him. For the next week, I was busy familiarizing myself with the foreign materials and our travel itinerary. Victoria seemed incredibly busy as well, and we barely had any private moments. When we occasionally passed in the elevator, she would just give me a professional nod. On Thursday morning, a town car picked us up to go to the airport. Victoria was wearing a chic travel outfit and sunglasses, and she spent the entire ride answering emails. On the plane, I had worried it would be awkward, but she continued working until just before landing, when she finally took a short nap. I watched her as she slept. With her guard down, she looked much softer. The forum was held at a massive convention center in Chicago. My job was a mix of tech support and general assistant duties, which was easier than I'd expected. When Victoria gave her keynote speech, she completely commanded the stage, receiving a thunderous applause. The second night, the organizers hosted a gala dinner cruise on Lake Michigan. I sat with the other junior staff in a secondary area, watching from afar as Victoria mingled with industry titans. Is that your CEO? A staffer from another company asked me. She's even more beautiful in person than in the magazines. I nodded, a strange sense of pride swelling in my chest. I hear she's single. The line of guys trying to date her must be a mile long. But she turns them all down, the guy continued, gossiping. What kind of man do you think it would take to win over a woman like that? I didn't answer, just kept my eyes on Victoria. As if sensing my gaze, she looked over in my direction. Our eyes met across the crowded room. She gave me a slight raise of her glass. I fumbled for my own drink and returned the gesture. After the gala, Victoria looked exhausted. In the car back to the hotel, she closed her eyes to rest, then said suddenly, we have a free morning tomorrow. Do you want to walk along the lakefront? I looked at her, surprised. Just the two of us. Who else? She said, opening her eyes, a faint smile on her lips. Are you afraid to be alone with me? There it again. I knew what she was doing, but I walked right into it anyway. Okay. The next morning, we walked along the shore of Lake Michigan. She had traded her power suits and gowns for a simple blouse and pants, and a wide-brimmed hat that made her look younger. We strolled along the path like any other tourists, talking occasionally. She pointed out different buildings on the skyline, telling me the stories behind them. She wasn't the powerful CEO anymore, just a patient and knowledgeable guide. My father used to bring me here when I was a kid, she said unexpectedly. He said if you stood here, you could see the future of the country. I was surprised by her sudden candor. It was the first time she had ever mentioned her personal life. Your father. He passed away many years ago, she said, her tone matter of fact. Now it's my turn to stand here and shape the future. We walked in silence for a while. I finally worked up the courage to ask, why did you bring me here? She stopped and turned to face me. Because I want you to see a bigger world, Liam. Not just stellar, not just our industry, but all the possibilities. The wind off the lake blew a strand of her hair across her face, and the morning sun glinted in her eyes. In that moment, I could hear my own heart pounding in my ears. On the flight back, I kept thinking about what she had said. After we landed, the company car dropped me off at my apartment first. Take tomorrow off to rest, she said as I got out. I'll see you in my office on Wednesday, usual time. Back in my dorm, Jake immediately swarmed me. How was Chicago? Did anything special happen? I shook my head, but I knew, deep down, that something had fundamentally changed. When I started looking forward to my Wednesday afternoon tutoring sessions, when I started analyzing the way she looked at me, when a simple walk could make my heart race, I knew I was far off my original course. That night, I received a text from Victoria. I had a nice time today. Thank you for the company. I stared at the screen. No formal address, no business-like tone. It was just a simple, friendly thank you. After a long hesitation, I replied, I had a great time too. Good night. I put my phone down and lay in bed, knowing I was wading into dangerous waters. But the most dangerous part was I didn't want to turn back. On the first Wednesday after returning from Chicago, I felt more nervous than usual. I stood in front of Victoria's office door, taking a deep breath before knocking. Come in, her voice called from inside. When I opened the door, I was surprised to see she wasn't alone. A distinguished-looking man, probably in his 50s, was sitting on the sofa in the reception area. Victoria stood beside him, her posture uncharacteristically deferential. Liam, you're here, she said with a nod, then turned to the man. Father, this is the intern I told you about, Liam Miller. I froze. Father? Victoria's father? The one she said had passed away? The man's sharp eyes raked over me, making me feel completely exposed. He gave a slight nod, not speaking, but his gaze was a thorough evaluation. I'm sorry, I didn't realize you had a guest, I stammered. I can come back later. No need, Victoria's father said, standing up and adjusting his suit jacket. I was just leaving. He walked toward the door, pausing as he passed me. Young man, a pleasure to meet you. I only breathed again after the door closed, feeling a sheen of sweat on my back. I'm sorry, I should have told you, Victoria said, walking over. Her voice held a rare note of apology. My father dropped by unexpectedly. I shook my head. It's fine. But, I thought you said. My biological father passed away, she explained quietly. This is my stepfather. He's also on the company's board of directors. Understanding dawned on me, and I also realized the significance of her sharing this private information. That afternoon's lesson went remarkably well. Victoria walked me through a major new project, even asking for my input on some of the initial planning. I found that I was starting to keep up with her thought process, occasionally even offering suggestions that made her nod in approval. As we were wrapping up, she said casually, there's a charity gala tomorrow night. I need an escort. The pen in my hand nearly fell to the floor. An escort? Yes, she said, her expression as neutral as if she were discussing the weather. The VP who was supposed to accompany me has a last-minute emergency, and I have a +1. I hesitated. After the Chicago trip, I was more aware than ever of the chasm between our worlds. A charity gala? That was a universe I didn't belong in. I'm just an intern. I don't think it's appropriate. That's exactly why you need more exposure, she said, using her now familiar line of reasoning, but her eyes held something different this time. Besides, I need someone by my side who isn't secretly plotting against me. That last part got to me. Beneath her polished, powerful exterior, there was a vulnerability I hadn't seen before. Okay, I heard myself say. The next evening, I stood in front of the mirror in a rented tuxedo, barely recognizing myself. Jake and Mark circled me, whistling in appreciation. Dude, if some heiress snatches you up tonight, don't forget your buddies. Jake joked, clapping me on the shoulder. I managed a weak smile, my stomach twisting in knots. My phone buzzed. Victoria's car was downstairs. The charity gala was held at a private art museum. The crowd was even more exclusive than at the previous event, filled with the city's top business leaders and socialites. Victoria, in a stunning black gown with a diamond necklace, took my arm as we entered. Relax, she whispered. You look like you're walking to your own execution. I tried to smile, but my face felt stiff. I'm just not used to this. Throughout the evening, I played the part of the perfect escort, getting her drinks, making polite conversation, and even learning how to gracefully exit a boring discussion. Victoria moved through the crowd like a queen, and I watched and learned from the sidelines. Halfway through the evening, the charity auction began. A painting by a contemporary artist was on the block, the bidding already in the 6 figures. Do you like it? Victoria asked me suddenly. I shook my head honestly. I don't really get modern art. She let out a soft laugh and raised her bidding paddle. 200,000 for Ms. Vance, the auctioneer boomed. I stared at her in shock. The painting looked like a random splash of colors on a canvas. There was no way it was worth that much. To my astonishment, she ended up winning it for $300,000. Why? I whispered as applause filled the room. She turned to me, a mischievous glint in her eye. Because the title of the painting is First Principles. After the auction, she went to handle the payment while I waited in the lounge area. That's when I heard a familiar voice. Liam? Is that really you? I turned to see my ex-girlfriend, Jessica, staring at me in disbelief. She was on the arm of a man who looked at least 10 years her senior. Jessica? Long time no see, I said awkwardly. We had broken up over a year ago because she thought I was immature and had no future. She looked me up and down, her expression a mix of emotions. What are you doing here? Work, I said simply. The man with her extended a hand. Mark Johnson, Jessica's fiancé. And you are? Liam Miller, a classmate of Jessica's, I said, shaking his hand, feeling his condescending gaze. And where are you working, Liam? Mark asked, his tone dripping with superiority. Before I could answer, Victoria returned. She glided to my side, her hand resting lightly on my arm. Sorry to keep you waiting. And who are these two? I made the introductions. Victoria smiled and shook Mark's hand. Mr. Johnson, a pleasure. I heard your company did excellent work on a new tech par project. Mark's attitude immediately shifted to one of deference. Ms. Vance, you're too kind. We're nothing compared to stellar. The look on Jessica's face was priceless. She stared at Victoria's hand on my arm, then at me, her eyes wide with incredulity. After a few more pleasantries, Victoria politely excused us and led me away. Once we were out of earshot, she asked quietly, "Ex-girlfriend?" I looked at her, surprised. "How did you know?" "A woman's intuition," she said with a small smile. "The way she looked at you." I shook my head wearily. "It's all in the past." "She clearly doesn't think so," Victoria said, a hint of amusement in her voice. "Need me to help you win this round?" Before I could answer, she was pulling me toward the dance floor. The band started playing a slow waltz. "I can't," I protested quietly. "Just follow me," she said, already leading me into the first step. This time felt more natural than the last. With her guidance, I relaxed, even managing a few simple turns. I could feel Jessica's eyes on us, but strangely, I didn't care. "Thank you," I murmured to Victoria as the music ended. She raised an eyebrow. "For what? The painting, the dance, or sticking it to your ex?" I smiled. "All of the above." After the gala, Victoria's driver took us home. In the car, she said suddenly, "The painting is for you." I turned to her in shock. "A $300,000 painting? I can't accept that." "It's just a decoration in my apartment, but it might mean something to you," she said, looking out at the passing lights. First principles, a reminder to never forget who you are at your core. I fell silent. The gift was impossibly extravagant, but her reason made it impossible to refuse. The car dropped me off at my building first. As I was getting out, she said, "We have a major product launch next week. I want you to be my temporary assistant for it." It had become our routine. She would make a request, I would hesitate, and I would ultimately agree. "Okay," I said, then added, "Thank you for tonight. For everything." She gave a small smile. "Good night, Liam." Back in my dorm, Jake and Mark were waiting up for me, ready for an interrogation. "So, did you meet any celebrities? Did you hobnob with any billionaires?" they asked in rapid succession. I gave them a brief rundown, leaving out the parts about my ex-girlfriend and the painting. "Dude, this internship is insane," Mark said, envious. "Hanging out with the CEO at all these fancy events. That's going to look amazing on your resume." I just gave a wry smile, not bothering to explain the complicated emotions these events stirred in me. The week of the product launch was the most intense project I had ever been a part of. Victoria demanded perfection, and every detail had to be double and triple checked. As her temporary assistant, I was constantly running around, but I was also learning an incredible amount. The night before the launch, the team stayed late to finalize everything. Eventually, everyone else left, leaving just Victoria and me in the main auditorium to do a final check. "Here, the angle of this light needs to be adjusted," she said, pointing to the left side of the stage. "The main camera will be over there tomorrow, and this angle will cast a shadow." I climbed up a ladder to adjust the light while she directed me from below. As I was climbing down, I missed a step and the ladder wobbled. "Be careful," she cried, rushing forward to steady it. I regained my balance, but as I stepped off, I stumbled and knocked her over. We both fell to the floor, with me landing on top of her, our faces just inches apart. Time seemed to stand still. I could feel the softness of her body beneath me. I could count each of her eyelashes. I could see my own reflection in her wide eyes. Her breath ghosted across my cheek, smelling faintly of mint. "I'm sorry," I said, scrambling to get up, but my hand accidentally pinned the hem of her dress. She placed a hand on my arm. "Wait." We stayed in that compromising position, neither of us moving. Her gaze dropped to my lips, and my heart began to pound. Finally, she was the one to look away. "Get up. The floor is cold." I quickly got on my feet and pulled her up. Her hand was soft, her fingertips cool. The light is adjusted," I said, trying to break the awkward silence. She nodded, smoothing down her clothes and hair. "Good. Tomorrow is a big day. Everything needs to be perfect." It was nearly midnight by the time we locked up and left the office. She insisted that her driver take me home first. The car ride was silent. I kept stealing glances at her. She just stared out the window, her profile illuminated by the passing streetlights. When we reached my building and I was about to get out, she said suddenly, "Don't be late tomorrow." "I won't, I promised." The launch was a massive success. Victoria was radiant on stage, fielding questions from the press with grace and intelligence. I stood backstage, watching her in the spotlight, a complex mix of emotions swirling inside me. Admiration, pride, and a faint, possessive stirring I didn't want to acknowledge. Afterward, the team went out for a celebratory dinner. Victoria raised a glass to everyone's hard work, giving me a special mention for my contribution. The team applauded, and I couldn't help but blush. Halfway through dinner, I noticed Victoria had disappeared. I looked around and finally found her on the rooftop terrace. She was leaning against the railing alone, looking out at the city skyline, a glass of champagne in her hand. "Why are you up here by yourself?" I asked, walking over to join her. She turned her head slightly. A moment of quiet in the middle of the noise is a precious thing. She took a sip of her champagne. "Thank you for today. I was just doing my job." "No, you did more than what was expected." She turned to face me. "Do you know why I've been giving you all these opportunities?" I shook my head. It was the question I'd been dying to ask. "Because in you, I see my younger self," she said, watching the bubbles in her glass. "Unbound by rules, full of potential. When I'm with you, I feel like I can touch a version of my life that I left behind." I was silent, not expecting that answer. She stepped closer, her fingers gently adjusting my tie. This was crooked. Her touch was light, but made my breath catch in my throat. After straightening my tie, her hand lingered on my chest, right over my heart. "Nervous?" she asked softly. I nodded honestly. "Every time you get close to me, I get nervous." She smiled, a genuine, unguarded smile. "Good." Then she did something that left me completely stunned. She stood on her toes and lightly kissed my cheek. "A reward for a job well done," she said, stepping back, a mischievous glint in her eye. "Let's go back down. They're probably looking for us." The spot where she kissed me burned all night. I knew something had changed, both in the way she looked at me and in the way my own heart was beginning to feel. Back in my dorm, I stood in front of the bathroom mirror, looking at the spot on my cheek, almost able to feel the ghost of her lips. My phone lit up. A text from Victoria. "Today was perfect. Thank you. Have a good weekend." I stared at the screen, for the first time not replying immediately. My heart was beating too fast. I needed time to process this whirlwind of emotions. Finally, I just replied, "Good night." But I knew that for me, sleep was a long way off. I spent the entire weekend holed up in my dorm, replaying that kiss on the cheek over and over in my mind. On Monday, I went into the office a half hour early, hoping to avoid running into Victoria alone. But the moment I walked into my department, I knew something was wrong. My coworkers were giving me strange looks, their hushed conversations stopping the moment I appeared. David called me into his office, his expression grave. "Liam, close the door." My stomach dropped. "What's going on?" He slid a tablet across the desk. "See for yourself." On the screen was a popular business gossip website. The headline made my blood run cold. Stellar Media CEO's secret romance with young intern exposed. Intimate moments at charity gala. Below the headline were a series of grainy but recognizable photos. Victoria with her arm in mine at the gala, the two of us dancing closely, and even a shot of me brushing a stray hair from her face, which had happened before the product launch when the wind had messed up her hair. But the last photo was the most damning, the kiss on the rooftop. The angle was bad, and the details were blurry, but anyone could see how close we were, her lips seemingly pressed against my cheek. This isn't true, I stammered, trying to explain. We were checking the venue that night. I almost fell. The kiss was just... David held up a hand to stop me. I believe you, Liam. The problem is, will anyone else? He sighed. It's already all over the office. The board is taking a very serious interest in this. I felt dizzy. Does Ms. Vance know? She was the first to be notified, David said, his expression complicated. She's in a meeting on the top floor right now, probably discussing how to handle this. I went back to my desk, unable to sit still. My coworkers were pretending to work, but I could feel their curious stares. My phone vibrated. A text from Jake. Dude, what's happening? Is that really you on the Corporate Confidential? Before I could reply, a message from Mark popped up. The entire campus is freaking out. You're actually dating the CEO of Stellar. I irritably shut off my phone and buried my head in my arms. Everything was a mess. At lunch, I hid in the most remote corner of the cafeteria, but one of the senior women from my department, Linda, found me anyway. She sat down across from me, her voice low. Liam, honey, let me give you some advice. This kind of thing happens in the corporate world, but you need to be careful. Her eyes were filled with pity. In the end, it's always the junior person who gets burned. I pushed my food around my plate, unable to eat, and didn't answer. At 2 p.m., HR summoned me to their office. I walked in expecting the worst, but was surprised to see Victoria there. She looked as calm as ever, and even gave me a slight nod. The head of HR, a woman named Karen, asked me to sit down and got straight to the point. Liam, I'm sure you've seen the news today. The company is taking this matter very seriously, and we need to understand the situation. I glanced at Victoria. She nodded, giving me the go-ahead to speak. I explained the real context behind each photo, emphasizing that our relationship was purely professional. Karen took meticulous notes, asking questions occasionally. Finally, she closed her folder. The company believes your explanation. However, the public perception is already formed, and we need to take certain measures. My heart sank. What kind of measures? Given the sensitive nature of the situation, we recommend temporarily transferring you to a different department to avoid further gossip, Karen said, looking at Victoria. Ms. Vance, what are your thoughts? Victoria's fingers tapped lightly on the table. I disagree. Both Karen and I stared at her. Hiding will only make the rumors look more credible, Victoria said, standing up, her voice firm. Liam will continue in his current role, and we will pursue legal action against the media outlets that publish these fabrications. Karen looked hesitant. But the board? I will handle the board personally, Victoria said, then turned to me. Liam, do you trust me? Looking into her determined eyes, I nodded almost instinctively. I trust you, Ms. Vance. As I was leaving the HR office, Victoria called out to me. I need you to work late tonight. We have a project that needs to be finished. I looked at her, surprised. With everything going on, you want us to work late alone? This is precisely the time when we need to act as if everything is normal, she said with a small smile. Besides, I genuinely need your help. We worked until 9 that night, and we truly did work on an urgent project. Victoria was professional and efficient, never once mentioning the scandal. After we finished, she suggested we get a late dinner. We sat across from each other in a small 24-hour diner near the office. It was the first time we had been alone in such a casual setting, and I felt a little awkward. Relax, she said, pouring me a cup of tea. It's not our first meal together. I held the warm cup in my hands. Why did you insist that I stay in my department? A transfer would have been easier. Because you shouldn't be punished for something you didn't do, she said, looking me in the eye. And because I see potential in you, and I won't let it be derailed by baseless gossip. My heart skipped a beat. Just because of my potential? She let out a soft laugh, not answering directly. Try the sliders. They're the best in the city. After dinner, she insisted on driving me back to my dorm. As we neared the campus, she said suddenly, "This week might be tough. The media won't let this go easily. If you feel overwhelmed, you could take a few days off." I shook my head. You were right. Hiding will only make things look worse. She smiled, a look of approval in her eyes. Good. The next few days were, indeed, tough. Even though the company issued a legal statement, the gossip blogs continued to churn out stories. Some even managed to dig up my basic information, though thankfully not too much of my private life was exposed. My Wednesday tutoring session with her proceeded as scheduled. Victoria was stricter than usual, and the topics we covered were more advanced. I realized this was her way of showing her trust in me, and it warmed me. At the end of the session, she said suddenly, "I have a family gathering tomorrow night. I need a date." I froze. A family gathering? My mother's birthday party, she said calmly. Some of my stepfather's relatives will be there. They are very interested in my personal life. I immediately understood. You want me to pretend? Not pretend, she cut me off. I just need a partner who won't spend the entire night asking me why I'm still single. I couldn't help but smile. But won't this make the rumors seem even more? We're already in it. Might as well get some use out of it, she said with a raised eyebrow. Besides, didn't you say you wanted to learn more about the industry? A family party is the best place to overhear business secrets. And once again, I knew it was a trap, and I walked right into it. Victoria's mother's birthday party was held at her stepfather's villa in the suburbs. The guests were all high society figures, and the event was even more formal than any I had attended before. I did my best to look presentable in a carefully chosen suit. Victoria wore a wine-red gown that gave her a softer, more feminine look. She naturally took my arm and introduced me to her relatives as a talented intern from the company. At the party, I saw Victoria's stepfather again. He nodded at me, his demeanor warmer than before. Victoria's mother was an elegant woman who looked much younger than her age. She held my hand and chatted with me for a long time, asking about everything from my studies to my family. Far more questions than a typical person would ask about their daughter's colleague. Victoria rarely brings friends to family events, she said with a smile. You must be very special. I was at a loss for words, but Victoria came to my rescue. Mom, don't scare Liam off. After dinner, Victoria was cornered by a group of relatives, so I slipped out onto the balcony for some fresh air. The night was cool, and the breeze helped clear my head. Not easy, is it? A voice said from behind me. I turned to see Victoria's stepfather holding 2 glasses of whiskey. He handed one to me. Thank you, sir, I said, taking the glass, feeling a little nervous. He leaned against the railing, looking at the lively party inside. Victoria has always been strong-willed. She wants to be the best at everything. Sometimes that strength can be worry. I listened silently, not sure why he was telling me this. I saw the news reports, he said, changing the subject. Don't pay them any mind. In our world, rumors are a dime a dozen. I felt a wave of relief. Thank you for your understanding, sir. He took a sip of his whiskey. But I am curious. Why do you accept all of Victoria's special invitations? His gaze was sharp. Is it just for the internship? I thought carefully before answering. At first it was, but now I think Ms. Vance. Victoria is a very special person, and I can learn a lot from her. He nodded thoughtfully. I hope you remember what you said tonight. Victoria's voice came from the doorway. So this is where you two are hiding. She walked over and stood naturally by my side. Her stepfather smiled, patted me on the shoulder, and went back inside. What did he say to you? Victoria asked quietly. Nothing much. Just small talk, I said, not mentioning the last part of our conversation. She seemed skeptical, but didn't press the issue. The wind blew her long hair, and a strand brushed against my cheek, carrying her familiar scent. Thank you for coming, she said softly. I usually hate these kinds of events, but having you here made it better. I looked at her profile, softened by the moonlight, and my heart beat faster. Any time. In the car on the way back, she seemed tired and leaned her head against the seat, closing her eyes. By the time we reached my dorm, she had fallen asleep. I didn't have the heart to wake her, so I just sat there, watching her. Without the daytime armor, she looked soft and vulnerable. Moonlight streamed through the window, and her beauty mark looked like a tiny shadow on her skin. On impulse, I reached out and gently brushed a stray piece of hair from her forehead. Her eyes snapped open, and she grabbed my wrist. The air in the car instantly froze. I stammered, trying to explain, but she just smiled, not letting go of my wrist. Are we here? Yeah, I said, my voice hoarse. She was still holding my wrist, her thumb unconsciously caressing my skin, sending a shiver through me. Next week is your last week of the internship, she said suddenly. I froze. Time had flown by so fast, I had almost forgotten that the internship was ending. Yeah, I said, a sudden pang of disappointment hitting me. What are your plans after? She asked, her grip still firm on my wrist. Go back to school, work on my thesis. I answered robotically, my entire focus on the spot where her hand was touching mine. She nodded and finally let go. Good. You should go. Good night. I felt like I was floating as I walked back to my dorm. Lying in bed, I could still feel the phantom touch of her hand on my wrist. During my final week as an intern, the rumors about us in the office started to die down, replaced by bigger news. Stellar Media was about to close a major strategic partnership with an international firm, and Victoria was going to be busier than ever. During our Wednesday session, she was distracted, constantly checking her phone. I'm sorry. Things are a little hectic right now, she finally said, putting her phone down. We might have to cut today's session short. It's fine, I said. You're busy. She shook her head. No, there's something important I need to tell you. She stood up and took an envelope from her desk drawer. After your internship ends, the company has an overseas training program. I've recommended you for it. I took the envelope, shocked. Inside was a detailed description of a 3-month, all-expenses-paid training program in Singapore. I was speechless. Why are you giving me this opportunity? Because you are the most suitable candidate, she said, turning to face the window, her back to me. After the training, you can return to a full-time position with a significant promotion and salary increase. I looked at her strong but lonely silhouette and suddenly understood. You're trying to get rid of me, aren't you? She turned around, a flicker of emotion in her eyes. Why would you say that? During a major business negotiation, it's probably best if the CEO's rumored love interest is out of the country, right? I asked directly. She was silent for a moment before finally admitting, that is part of the consideration. But more importantly, this is a genuinely good opportunity for your career. I put the envelope down. What if I don't want to go? She took a step closer, her expression complicated. Liam, don't let personal feelings interfere with a professional decision. Personal feelings? I looked up at her. Ms. Vance, what exactly is the relationship between us? It was the first time we had directly addressed the elephant in the room. The air grew thick, and the only sound was the pounding of our hearts. Finally, she looked away. I am your boss. You are my employee. That's all. My heart sank. Understand. Thank you for the opportunity. I'll think about it. Our session ended early that day. When I left, I didn't say goodbye like I usually did. Friday was my last day. My department threw me a small farewell party, and David gave me a gift on behalf of the team. Victoria didn't show up. She was supposedly in meetings all day. As I was leaving the office, I got a text message. Have you decided about the training program? I need an answer by Monday. I stared at the message, unable to reply. As I was packing on my desk, the receptionist called out to me. Mr. Miller, this is for you. It was a long, thin box. Inside was the painting, First Principles. Tucked inside was a card with her familiar handwriting. Never forget your first principles. Wishing you a bright future. Victoria. I carried the painting back to my dorm and stood by the window, looking out at the city lights. The past 3 months, from our awkward first meeting in my bathroom to this complicated mess of emotions, felt like a dream. My phone vibrated again. A message from Victoria. Whatever you decide, I will respect your choice. Thank you for your companionship these past few months. In that moment, I suddenly understood my own heart. It wasn't about her status, her wealth, or her beauty. It was about the real person underneath the armor, the one who occasionally showed a flicker of vulnerability. I picked up my phone and replied, I accept the training opportunity. Not because I want to be sent away, but because I want to one day be able to stand beside you, not behind you. After hitting send, I let out a long, slow breath. Whatever lay ahead, I was ready. After sending that message, I didn't sleep a wink. At dawn, my phone finally lit up. Victoria's reply was so brief and professional it threw me for a loop. Acknowledged. HR will contact you to process the paperwork. No comment on my bold declaration. No hint of emotion. The business-like tone made my confidence deflate. Maybe I had misread everything. Maybe those intimate moments had been all in my head. The following weeks were a blur of activity. Defending my thesis, final edits, saying goodbye to friends. The paperwork for Singapore was processed efficiently, but my heart wasn't in it. A week before I was scheduled to leave, Chloe asked me out to dinner. At the restaurant, she slid an envelope across the table with a conspiratorial wink. "This is for Victoria," she said. "She's been swamped. That international partnership hit a snag." I opened the envelope. Inside was a map of Singapore and a handwritten list of recommended places to visit and restaurants to try. At the bottom, a short note. "In between your training, I hope you'll have time to explore." Victoria, my heart started beating faster. This thoughtful, personal gift meant more to me than any grand gesture. "She really cares about you," Chloe said softly. "I've known her for years, and I've never seen her go to this much trouble for anyone." I traced the lines of the list with my finger, not saying a word, but the cloud that had been hanging over me started to lift. The night before I left, my dorm was packed with friends who had come to see me off. Mark and Jake were dramatically clinging to my legs. "Don't go, man. Who's going to get us into fancy parties now?" In the middle of the laughter and chaos, my phone rang. It was an unknown number, but I recognized the voice immediately. "What time is your flight tomorrow?" Victoria asked, her voice clear, the background quiet. 10 in the morning, I said, stepping out onto the balcony to escape the noise. "I'll have a car sent to pick you up." "That's okay. I already have one booked." There was a pause on the other end. Then she said, "Have a safe flight. Text me when you land." Was that it? No other goodbye? I felt a pang of disappointment, but replied politely, "Thanks, I will." After hanging up, I stared out at the city skyline, a sense of melancholy washing over me. 3 months wasn't a lifetime, but it was long enough for things to change. The next day at the airport, as I was waiting in line to check in, I saw a familiar figure. Victoria was dressed in simple, casual clothes, a pair of large sunglasses covering most of her face, but I recognized her instantly by her posture and that single beauty mark. "Ms. Vance? What are you?" I was too stunned to speak. She took off her sunglasses. Her eyes looked tired. "Am I not allowed to see off a valuable employee?" I noticed she was holding a small paper bag. "What's that?" "Something to read on the plane," she said, pushing the bag into my hands, her tone still all business. "The training is important. Don't disappoint the company." We stood there in awkward silence. The boarding announcement broke the tension. "I should go," I said, wishing time would slow down. She nodded, then stepped forward and gave me a brief, tight hug. It was so quick and restrained, but it left me frozen in place. "Take care of yourself," she whispered in my ear, then quickly pulled away and walked off without looking back. It wasn't until the plane was in the air that I remembered the bag. Inside was a copy of the latest industry report. On the title page, in her familiar handwriting, was a single sentence. "The world is big. See it, then come home." "Victoria," I traced the words with my finger, a slow smile spreading across my face. Life in Singapore was intense and fulfilling. The training program was demanding, and I spent most of my days in classes or working on projects. I managed to visit a few of the places Victoria had recommended, sending her a photo from each one, but her replies were rare and brief, usually just an acknowledged or nice. The warmth I had felt started to cool again. One night, about a month in, I was working late on a presentation when I got a video call request. It was Victoria. I answered surprised. Her face filled the screen. She was at home, wearing silk pajamas, her hair casually tied up. She looked softer, more relaxed. "Sorry to bother you so late," she said, her voice a little hoarse. "I just finished a meeting and saw the photos you sent. I suddenly wanted to see what it looked like over there." I was flattered and quickly turned the camera to show her my small apartment and the view from my window. We talked for almost an hour, mostly about nothing. Funny things that happened in training, the weather in Singapore, the progress on our latest project. It was the first time we had talked so easily, like old friends, without the power dynamics or the hesitant flirting. As we were saying goodbye, she said, "Next time you send photos, include a few of yourself. The HR report mentioned you might have lost weight." My heart skipped a beat. "You read the HR reports about me?" "It's normal for a CEO to be concerned about an employee's well-being," she said matter-of-factly, but her eyes flickered. After that, we started talking more often. Sometimes it was a late-night video call, other times just a quick text. She still maintained a professional demeanor, but hints of a deeper concern started to slip through. In my second month of training, I ran into some trouble. A local trainee in my group, driven by a competitive streak, deliberately altered some data in my report, causing me to look foolish during a major presentation. That evening, I sat alone on a bench by Marina Bay, feeling dejected. My phone rang. It was Victoria. "I heard today's presentation didn't go smoothly," she said directly. I gave a wry laugh. "Your sources are fast. The program coordinator sends me weekly updates," she said, then paused. "Do you need me to intervene?" "No," I said immediately. "I can handle it myself." There was a moment of silence on the other end. Then she said, "I know you can, but I just wanted to say, when you're treated unfairly, you don't always have to bear it alone." Her words hit me unexpectedly. Maybe it was the gentle night, or maybe it was the accumulated stress, but for the first time, I allowed myself to be vulnerable with her. "Sometimes it's exhausting," I admitted. "I want to prove I'm worthy of the faith you've shown in me, but I'm terrified of disappointing you." "Liam," she said softly, "I have never been disappointed in you. I chose you not because you're perfect, but because you are constantly learning and growing." We talked for a long time that night. She told me stories about her own early career, the setbacks and mistakes that were hidden behind her successful image. For the first time, I felt the invisible wall between us start to crumble. In my final month of training, news broke that the partnership with the international firm had been successfully finalized. Stellar's stock value soared. I texted Victoria my congratulations. She replied with a simple, smiley face, the first emoji she had ever used with me. A week before graduation, the program held a farewell gala. I was forced into a suit, and I milled around, unenthusiastically making small talk. A female trainee from Europe had taken an interest in me and stuck to my side all evening. "Liam, want to get a drink after this?" she asked boldly, her hand on my arm. I politely declined. "Sorry, I have to prepare for my final presentation tomorrow." She didn't give up. "Just one drink. It won't take long." I was trying to think of a way to escape when my phone buzzed. A video call from Victoria. I felt a wave of relief and excused myself, walking to a quiet corner to answer. The image on the screen made me pause. Victoria was clearly at a formal event, wearing a black evening gown, her makeup perfect, the city skyline sparkling behind her. "Am I interrupting?" she asked, her eyes sharp as she took in my surroundings. "Looks like a lively party." I instinctively started explaining. "It's just the graduation gala. Nothing special." "That blonde woman seemed to think otherwise," she said, her tone even, but I could hear an edge to it. I was surprised by her perceptiveness and decided to be honest. "Just a classmate." She asked me out for a drink, but I said no. Her expression softened. "How are the preparations for your final presentation?" We talked about work for a few minutes, but we both seemed distracted. Suddenly, someone called her name from off-screen. She answered, then looked back at me. "I have to go. I need to give a speech." She hesitated, a rare look of uncertainty on her face. "Liam, do you—" She didn't finish her sentence. The screen suddenly shook violently, and the call disconnected. I tried calling her back, but it went straight to voicemail. A strange sense of unease washed over me. I couldn't shake the feeling all night. I kept checking my phone, but there was no word from her. The next morning, I finally got a text. "Sorry, my phone died last night. Good luck with your final presentation." The tone was all business, as if her hesitant, unfinished sentence had just been my imagination. Disappointed, I focused on my final preparations, resolving to ask her about it when I got back. My final presentation was a huge success. The project proposal I presented received high praise from the instructors, and several companies in attendance expressed interest. The first person I wanted to share the news with was Victoria. After the ceremony, I eagerly checked my phone, but there were no messages from her. This was unusual. She knew today was my graduation. The feeling of unease returned, stronger this time. I called her, but it went to voicemail again. After some hesitation, I called Chloe. "Chloe, do you know what's going on with Victoria?" "I can't reach her." Chloe was silent for a moment, and when she spoke, her voice was strange. "She's fine, just really busy." "When are you coming back?" "Day after tomorrow," I said, frowning. "Are you sure she's okay? Something feels wrong." "She's fine," Chloe said, her voice a little too cheerful. "You'll see when you get back. Hey, send me your flight info. I'll pick you up." After we hung up, my anxiety spiked. Chloe was definitely hiding something. The next 36 hours were agonizing. I kept trying to contact Victoria with no success. Even the HR department was vague, just saying that Ms. Vance was currently out of the office. By the time my plane landed, my nerves were frayed. I walked toward the arrivals gate, desperately searching for Chloe. But the person waiting for me wasn't my sister. It was someone I never expected, Victoria's stepfather. "Mr. Miller, welcome back," he said, his expression grim. "The car is outside. There are some things we need to discuss." My heart nearly stopped. "Is Victoria okay?" He didn't answer directly, just motioned for me to follow. "Let's talk in the car." The moment we were inside the luxury sedan, I pressed him. "What happened to Miss Vance? Is she all right?" Her stepfather sighed. 2 weeks ago, at a gala, Victoria collapsed. The doctors diagnosed her with a heart arrhythmia brought on by extreme exhaustion. They ordered complete bed rest. I was stunned. Why didn't anyone tell me? "It was Victoria's wish. She didn't want to disrupt your final presentation," he said, handing me a folder. "More importantly, while she was recovering, we discovered some problems at the company. Someone took advantage of her absence to sabotage the partnership deal. The company is now facing a severe financial crisis." I flipped through the folder in shock, looking at the complex financial data and transaction records. What can I do?" "The first thing Victoria asked for when she woke up was news about you," her stepfather said, looking me in the eye. "She's at a private care facility in the suburbs right now. I need your help looking after her, and I also need your help investigating the problems at the company." As the car headed out of the city, my mind was a whirlwind. I was terrified for Victoria's health, furious about the betrayal at her company, and at the same time, I felt a secret thrill. She needed me. When she was in trouble, I was the one she thought of. The care facility was serene and secluded. Victoria's room was at the end of a quiet hall. When I pushed the door open, I saw her propped up against the pillows, her face pale, but her eyes as bright as ever. She was looking at her phone. On the screen was a photo from my graduation ceremony. She looked up and saw me, and her expression froze. The phone slipped from her fingers onto the blanket. "Liam, why didn't you tell me?" I asked, my voice trembling as I walked to her bedside. She looked down. "I didn't want to interfere with your big moment." I sat on the edge of the bed and gently took her hand. "Nothing is more important than you." The words came out before I could stop them. We both froze, but I didn't let go of her hand, and she didn't pull away. The afternoon sun streamed through the window, and a gentle breeze rustled the curtains. We just looked at each other, no words needed. Some things were already understood. After a long moment, she said softly, "Welcome home, Liam." I knew that this time, things between us would be completely different. Victoria's hand trembled slightly in mine, but she didn't pull away. We sat in silence, just looking at each other. Sunlight filtered through the blinds, casting soft stripes across her pale face, outlining her features in a golden haze. "You've lost weight," she finally said, her voice as soft as a whisper. It was only then that I realized I was still clutching her hand. I quickly let go. "Sorry, I was just so worried." She reached out and caught my retreating hand. "Don't go." The words were spoken so quickly and quietly, they were almost a breath. My heart slammed against my ribs. This was the first time Victoria had ever explicitly shown that she needed me, not as a boss needing an employee, but as a woman needing a man. "I'm not going anywhere," I said, my grip firm as I held her hand. For the next few weeks, I stayed at the care facility as her special assistant, helping her recover while also assisting her stepfather with the investigation into the company's finances. My days were filled with work, and my evenings were spent by her side. The doctor had ordered complete rest, but she couldn't stop herself from working. We compromised. She could work, but she had to do it from bed, with me acting as her hands and eyes. "Cross-reference this data," she instructed, pointing at my laptop screen. "The budget submitted by VP Wong doesn't match the actual expenditures." I quickly found the discrepancy. Item 3. The venue rental fee is inflated by 20%. Victoria's eyes turned cold. I knew it. Keep digging. Flag every anomaly. We worked like a pair of detectives, sifting through documents and spreadsheets, slowly uncovering a sophisticated web of fraud. Someone was systematically embezzling money from the company through fake invoices and padded expenses. "It's VP Zhang," Victoria said, looking at the clear trail of evidence. Her voice was calm, but laced with icy fury. I trusted him too much. I looked at her, worried. You need to rest. Your stepfather and I can handle this. She shook her head. No, I have to see this through myself. She was seized by a sudden coughing fit, and her face grew even paler. I quickly handed her a glass of water and gently rubbed her back. The doctor said you need a rest. This can wait. She leaned against my shoulder for a moment to catch her breath, then asked softly, Liam, why are you doing this? None of this is your problem. I was silent for a moment, then decided to be completely honest. Because you helped me when I was in Singapore, remember? With the student who sabotaged my data. She nodded slightly. HR mentioned it in their report. You told me then that when you're treated unfairly, you don't always have to bear it alone, I said, looking at her. I'm saying the same thing to you now. You don't have to face this by yourself. Her eyes glistened for a second before she regained her composure. Thank you. But this situation is more complicated than you think. Zhang has deep roots in the company. Getting rid of him won't be easy. Then we'll take our time, I said. The most important thing is for you to get better. Just then, a nurse came in with her medication. After taking it, she quickly grew drowsy. I fluffed her pillows and tucked her in. Don't leave, she mumbled, grabbing the hem of my shirt as she drifted off to sleep, like a child afraid of being alone. I'm right here, I whispered, sitting by her bed and taking her hand in mine. Once she was sound asleep, I slipped my hand away and stepped out onto the balcony to call Chloe. Chloe, I need a favor. I need everything you can find on a VP Zhang at Stellar, especially his work history before he joined the company. Chloe whistled on the other end of the line. Wow, little brother is playing corporate raider now. You got it. Leave it to me. Over the next few days, I spent my time taking care of Victoria and secretly gathering evidence. Chloe, through her network, found a crucial piece of information. Zhang had been involved in a similar scandal at his previous job, but it had been hushed up. Victoria's health was steadily improving, and we were able to take short walks in the garden. She leaned on my arm, her steps still a little unsteady. After this is all over, I want to take a break, she said suddenly. Go somewhere no one knows me, and just be. My heart sped up. Anywhere in particular? She smiled at me. Do you have any recommendations? A college student should know all the best places to go. We talked about travel plans like any two friends, momentarily forgetting the corporate warfare we were engaged in. In that moment, I wish we could stay like that forever. But the peace was short-lived. On Friday afternoon, as I was helping Victoria with her emails, her stepfather called, his voice urgent. Zhang knows we're onto him. He's trying to destroy evidence. I'm heading back to the office now. You two be careful. I was instantly on alert. What do you need me to do? Just protect Victoria. I'm worried he might do something desperate. After hanging up, I told Victoria what was happening. Her expression immediately turned serious. We have to go back to the company. Right now, it's not about the evidence. It's about reassuring our employees and clients. I disagreed. Your body isn't ready for that. It's too dangerous. Liam, this is my company. My life's work, she said, her gaze firm. I can't hide away when it needs me the most. We compromised. She would lead a video conference with the senior executives, but she would remain at the facility. That evening, Victoria chaired the emergency meeting. On the screen, she looked pale but composed, her eyes sharp and her voice steady. She was once again the formidable CEO. I stood behind the camera, watching her command a room, a mix of pride and worry in my heart. Halfway through the meeting, the facility's alarm system blared. A nurse burst in. Ms. Vance, a suspicious vehicle, tried to force its way onto the grounds. Security advises you to move to the safe room immediately. The executives on the video call erupted in a panic. But Victoria remained unervingly calm. Let's continue the meeting. As I was saying about the third quarter earnings report, I made a split-second decision. I swept Victoria up into my arms. Meeting adjourned for 5 minutes. We have an emergency. Ignoring her protests and the shocked faces on the screen, I carried her and followed the nurse to the safe room. She was lighter than I expected, and I could feel her heart racing as she rested against my chest. The safe room was a reinforced chamber with its own communication system. I gently set Victoria down in a chair and checked that the door was secure. That was reckless, she scolded. Abruptly ending the meeting like that will cause a panic. Your safety is more important than corporate image, I said firmly. Now, you can continue your meeting. She looked at me, her expression complex, but she eventually nodded. The meeting resumed. Victoria calmly explained away the technical difficulties and continued outlining her strategy. I stood behind her, keeping a watchful eye on the door. An hour later, the alarm was deactivated. It turned out Zhang had tried to confront Victoria in person and had been stopped by security. At the same time, her stepfather called with good news. The key evidence was secured, and the police were involved. The immediate crisis was over, but Victoria suddenly slumped in her chair, a cold sweat breaking out on her forehead. "What's wrong? Are you okay?" I asked, kneeling beside her. She managed a weak smile. "I'm fine, just a little tired. Help me wrap up the meeting." I took the headset from her and delivered the closing remarks myself. The executives on the other end, though surprised, accepted my authority without question. After I ended the call, I saw that Victoria had fallen asleep in the chair. I didn't wake her. I just gently lifted her and carried her back to her room. That night, I sat by her bed, watching her sleep restlessly, a powerful protective instinct rising within me. This woman, who seemed so strong, needed someone to look after her more than anyone. In the middle of the night, she woke with a start. She saw me and visibly relaxed. "I thought you had left." "I promised I wouldn't," I said, handing her a glass of warm water. "Bad dream." She took the glass, her fingers brushing against mine. "I dreamed the company went bankrupt, and everyone left me, including you." I took her hand. Even if the company went bankrupt, I wouldn't leave. I was never interested in Stellar Media. I was interested in its CEO. The words hung in the air, too honest for either of us to ignore. In the dark, I could hear the sound of our hearts beating faster. Finally, she looked away. "It's late. You should get some rest." I knew it was a gentle dismissal. It stung, but I nodded politely. "Call me if you need anything." I was at the door when she called my name. "Liam." I turned. She was sitting up in bed, silhouetted by the moonlight. "Thank you," she whispered, "for everything." In that moment, I knew some line had been crossed. The next day, Victoria's stepfather visited with an update. Zhang was in police custody, the company's losses were manageable, and most of the funds were recoverable. "It's thanks to Liam that we caught those discrepancies so early," he said, clapping me on the shoulder. "You have a lot of potential, young man." Victoria smiled at me. "He certainly does." After he left, we were alone again. Sunlight streamed into the room, and the air felt charged with unspoken emotions. "The doctor said I can be discharged," Victoria said suddenly, "but I'll still need to rest at home for a while." My heart sank a little. "So I guess. Would you be willing to continue as my special assistant?" she interrupted. "Not just for work, but also for my personal life." I froze, not sure if I understood her correctly. She must have seen the confusion on my face, because a faint blush crept up her cheeks. "I need someone to help me manage my work, and also someone to make sure I eat and rest properly. The salary will be triple your intern pay." I looked at her, at the rare blush on her cheeks, and suddenly I understood. This wasn't just a job offer. The woman who was always in control was, in her own clumsy way, telling me that she needed me. "The salary doesn't matter," I said softly, "but I have one condition." She raised an eyebrow. "What is it?" "Stop calling me Liam or employee," I said, gathering my courage. "Just use my first name." We looked at each other, the sweet tension hanging in the air. Finally, she smiled. "All right, Liam." She still used my full first name, but the tone was completely different. On the day she was discharged, I helped her pack. In one of her folders, I found all the photos I'd sent her from Singapore, each one carefully printed and saved. She walked in and saw me looking at them, and her face turned a shade of crimson I had never seen before. "That's—" HR suggested we keep a record of our employees' overseas experiences. I couldn't help but laugh. "Does HR also suggest you keep solo shots of your employees in front of the Merlion statue?" She snatched the folder from me, her voice uncharacteristically flustered. "Shut up." In that moment, I saw the real woman beneath the armor. Someone who could be shy, flustered, and almost girlish. In the car on the way back, she rested her head on my shoulder. The sunlight played across her face, and her beauty mark looked like a tiny anchor, mooring my gaze. My phone buzzed. A text from Jake. Dude, so the rumors are true? The whole campus is saying you and the CEO are living together. I looked at the woman resting on my shoulder and smiled, typing back 2 words. Busy. Talk later. Some stories were just beginning. Victoria's apartment was in the most exclusive building in the city, a penthouse duplex with floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the glittering skyline. I stood at the entrance holding her bags, suddenly feeling out of place. Come in, she said, handing me a new pair of slippers. The guest room is on the first floor. My bedroom is on the second. You can use any part of the apartment except for my bedroom and my office. I slipped on the slippers and followed her into the immaculately designed space. Everything was so pristine it looked like a showroom, completely devoid of any personal touch. It's beautiful, but it doesn't feel like a home, I commented. She laughed softly. I mostly just sleep here. Why would it need to feel like a home? I set down her bags and looked at her seriously. From now on, this is more than just a place to sleep. The doctor ordered you to rest, and that requires a restful environment. She raised an eyebrow. Is my new assistant already giving me orders? It's part of my job description, I said. First things first, we need to go grocery shopping. An hour later, we were in the local supermarket. Victoria pushed the cart, looking completely lost. I haven't been to a place like this in probably a decade, she admitted. My assistant usually handles all the shopping, or I have things delivered. I started loading the cart with fresh vegetables and meat. Well then, today, Ms. Vance gets to experience how the other half lives. She looked at the items in the cart, frowning. How do these become food? I stared at her. You don't know how to cook? I can make coffee and microwave takeout, she said proudly. I burst out laughing. Okay, new job duty, teaching you basic survival skills. As we shopped, people kept recognizing Victoria, but she didn't seem to mind the curious stares. At one point, she stopped and pointed at a brand of chips on the shelf. I used to love these when I was a kid, she said, a nostalgic look in her eyes. Then I went to study abroad, and when I came back, I couldn't find them anywhere. I grabbed a few bags and tossed them in the cart. Now you can. Back at the apartment, I put on an apron and started cooking. Victoria leaned against the kitchen doorway, watching me. This feels strange, she said. After my father died, not many people have cooked for me. My knife paused over the cutting board. What about your mother? She was busy, and after she remarried, she had a new family, she said, her voice flat, but I could hear the loneliness beneath it. I learned to be independent very early on. After dinner, I insisted she rest on the couch while I cleaned up. Through the glass door of the kitchen, I could see her curled up with a folder, her brow furrowed, occasionally rubbing her temples. The doctor said you need to work less, I said, walking out and gently taking the folder from her hands. She sighed. The company just went through a crisis. There's a lot to do. Then let me help, I said, sitting beside her. You dictate, I'll type. We worked like that until late into the night. She would lean back with her eyes closed, laying out her thoughts and strategies, and I would quickly organize them into emails and memos. As we worked, I gained an even deeper appreciation for her sharp, analytical mind. That's enough for tonight, she finally said, her voice heavy with fatigue. I shut down the laptop and noticed how pale she looked. Are you feeling okay? Just a little dizzy, she murmured. It happens. I instinctively reached out and touched her forehead. She flinched slightly, but didn't pull away. Our eyes met, and the air between us suddenly felt charged. I'll get you a glass of water, I said, breaking the gaze, my heart pounding. When I returned, she had fallen asleep on the couch. Moonlight streamed through the massive windows, softening her features, making her look vulnerable. I gently draped a blanket over her and knelt by the couch, just watching her for a long time. In that moment, I knew my feelings for her had grown far beyond simple concern. The next morning, I was woken by a clatter from the kitchen. I walked in to find Victoria wrestling with a frying pan, a blackened object smoking in the center. What are you doing? I asked, quickly turning off the stove. She looked embarrassed. Trying to make breakfast. Apparently, it's harder than negotiating a merger. I looked at the charred remains of a fried egg and couldn't help but smile. Why don't you let me handle it? You can set the table. After breakfast, we started our workday from home. I handled the day-to-day tasks while she took video calls with her executives. Around noon, I noticed her voice growing weaker during a meeting. I insisted she end the call, and discovered she was running a fever. The doctor came and confirmed it was due to exhaustion compromising her immune system. I need to go back to the office. She mumbled, trying to get up. I gently pushed her back down. The company will survive one day without you. Your only job right now is to rest. For once, she didn't argue. I sat by her bed and read her the financial news until she fell asleep. That afternoon, Chloe came to visit. She whistled when I opened the door, wearing an apron. Well, look at you, the perfect house husband. My little brother's all grown up. The noise woke Victoria, who called down from the second floor. Chloe immediately ran upstairs. Victoria, how are you? I heard that monster Zhang almost ruined you. I stayed downstairs to make tea, but I could still hear their conversation. So are you two, living together now? Chloe asked, her voice full of curiosity. He's my special assistant. It's a work arrangement, Victoria replied wearily. Oh, please. What special assistant lives in the CEO's penthouse? And from the looks of it, he's enjoying taking care of you. Chloe, stop it. When I brought the tea upstairs, their conversation immediately stopped. Chloe winked at me. Liam, I'm leaving Victoria in your hands. If you don't take good care of her, you'll have to answer to me. After Chloe left, Victoria seemed drained. I took her temperature, still a low-grade fever. Want to listen to some music to relax? I suggested. She nodded. I put on some soft jazz and sat by her bed. Liam, she asked quietly, why are you so good to me? Is it just because of the job? The music filled the silence as her question hung in the air. I looked at her, at the mixture of hope and fear in her eyes, and decided to be honest. At first it was, but now, I took a deep breath. Now it's because of you. Just you. She didn't answer, but she didn't look away. We listened to the music until she fell asleep again. Over the next few days, Victoria's health improved. We settled into a strange but comfortable routine. Work during the day, and in the evening I would cook, and we would watch a movie or just talk. She started opening up to me, telling me about her childhood dreams, her time studying abroad, the struggles of starting her own company. I, in turn, told her about my life, my plans, my own silly worries. One evening, we were sitting on her terrace, looking at the stars. She pointed out a constellation, telling me the Greek myth behind it. I watched her profile, softened by the starlight, and asked suddenly, that beauty mark, were you born with it? She touched the spot under her eye. Yeah, I used to hate it as a kid, thought it was a flaw. It wasn't until someone called it a beauty mark that I started to accept it. It's beautiful, I said softly, like a tiny star in the night sky. She turned to look at me, her eyes shining in the dark. Liam, Her words were cut off by her phone ringing. She answered, and her expression grew serious. Okay, I understand. I'll be in the office tomorrow to handle it. She hung up and sighed. The peace and quiet is over. An urgent project came up that needs my personal attention. I felt a pang of disappointment, but nodded. You're feeling much better. You should be fine. The next day, we went back to Stellar Media together. The employees were surprised but relieved to see Victoria back. The scandal with VP Zhang had been handled, and the company was back on track. But I quickly realized that the Victoria at the office was the CEO again. She was consumed by meetings and decisions, and our interactions reverted to being strictly professional. If we passed in the hall, she would just give me a brief nod, as if our late-night talks in her apartment had never happened. I felt a sense of loss, but told myself that this was our reality. On Friday night, the company threw a party to celebrate surviving the crisis. Victoria was the center of attention, radiant and powerful as she moved through the crowd. I stood in a corner by myself, feeling the distance between us more acutely than ever. Maybe everything that had happened at her apartment was just an anomaly, a product of the unusual circumstances. All alone, a familiar voice asked. I turned to see Jessica standing there. She looked more polished than before, but the calculating look in her eyes was the same. I hear you're Ms. Vance's special assistant now, she said, her tone probing. And that you've even moved into her place? I frowned. You shouldn't spread rumors. She laughed. Don't be so tense. I'm just curious. I mean, how could a woman like Victoria Vance ever be seriously interested in someone like you? Her words stung, but before I could retort, another voice cut in. Liam, there you are. Victoria smoothly took my arm and smiled at Jessica. Ms. Davis, thank you for coming. I'm afraid I have to borrow my assistant. She pulled me toward the dance floor, leaving Jessica speechless. You didn't have to do that, I said quietly. I can handle her myself. I know, she said, looking up at me. But I don't want to hear anyone talk down to you. The music started, and she led me in a dance. As our colleagues watched in surprise, we moved together just as we had before. I'm sorry I've been distant these past few days, she said softly. Coming back to the office, there was just so much to deal with. I was surprised by her honesty. It's your company. Of course work comes first. But I don't want you to think I've forgotten, she said, her fingers tightening on my hand. Those conversations, they mean a lot to me. We spun to the music, her eyes sparkling under the lights. I usually work from home on the weekends, she said suddenly. If you don't mind, I could use your help. As my assistant, of course. I knew it wasn't just a work request. It was her clumsy, roundabout way of asking me to be with her. Of course, Ms. Vance, I replied, deliberately formal. She frowned slightly. In private, you can call me Victoria, I finished for her, seeing a flash of surprise and pleasure in her eyes. After the party, she insisted on driving me back to our apartment. In the car, she seemed tired and leaned her head on my shoulder. By the time we arrived, she was asleep. I didn't wake her. I just gently lifted her and carried her into the elevator. She snuggled against my chest unconsciously, her breathing even. While I laid her down on her bed, her eyes fluttered open. Will you always be here for me? She murmured sleepily. My heart pounded. This wasn't the powerful CEO. This was just Victoria, with all her defenses down. As long as you need me, I promised softly. She closed her eyes, a small smile on her lips. I stood in her doorway for a long time, knowing that some lines had been irrevocably crossed. The next morning, I woke to noises from the kitchen. I walked in to find Victoria, wearing an apron, struggling with a pan. What's the disaster this time? I asked with a grin. She turned, a smudge of flour on her cheek. Attempting pancakes. I think I need an expert. I came up behind her and placed my hands over hers on the spatula. Like this. A gentle flip. We stood like that, my arms around her, until the pancake was perfectly cooked. She turned in my arms, our faces inches apart. Thank you, she whispered, for everything. I knew she wasn't just talking about the pancakes. In the bright morning sun, something had quietly shifted between us. And this time I wasn't afraid. Victoria's pancakes were a qualified success. While not perfectly round, they tasted surprisingly good. We sat at the dining table, sunlight flooding the apartment, giving her a soft, ethereal glow. Looks like you have some hidden culinary talent after all, Ms. Vance, I joked, spearing the last piece. She raised an eyebrow. It's Victoria. The name rolled off her tongue with an effortless intimacy, as if it had always been this way between us. My heart skipped a beat. I followed her lead. Victoria, a slow smile spread across her lips, her eyes shining with satisfaction. In that moment, with the morning sun, the simple meal, and her across the table, everything felt impossibly perfect. After breakfast, we settled into our work-from-home routine, but the atmosphere was entirely different. She no longer kept a professional distance. She'd come over to my workspace to check on my progress, her fingers brushing my shoulder. When she complained of a headache, I'd massage her temples, and she would lean into my touch instead of pulling away. Around noon, as I was about to start on lunch, the doorbell rang. Victoria answered it and returned with a beautifully wrapped box. What's this? I asked. She seemed a little shy. Open it. Inside was a set of high-end men's skincare and a soft, luxurious cashmere sweater. I looked up at her, surprised. I noticed your face cream was almost empty, she said, trying to sound casual, though the tips of her ears were pink. And the sweater. I just thought it would look good on you. A warmth spread through my chest. She had noticed details even I had overlooked. Thank you, I said softly. I love them. She just nodded and turned away, pretending to be busy, but I saw the smile she couldn't hide. That afternoon, an urgent matter required us to go back to the office. As we walked into the Stellar building, I could feel the curious stares of the employees. Victoria maintained her CEO composure, but the small act of turning to whisper something to me was enough to fuel 1,000 rumors. During a break in a meeting, David pulled me aside. Man, the whole company is buzzing about you and the boss. Do you need me to help shut it down? I shook my head. Thanks, but there's no need. It would only make things worse. He clapped me on the shoulder. Whatever's going on, I'm happy for you. Ms. Vance seems more human lately. I glanced into the conference room at Victoria. She was at the whiteboard, explaining a complex strategy completely in her element. He was right. She wasn't the same ice queen. There was a new softness, a new warmth to her. After work, we headed back to the apartment together. In the elevator, she said suddenly, "What are your plans for the weekend?" My heart stirred. I didn't have any, but maybe I do now. She smiled. "I know a great spot for stargazing." Interested. And so, on Saturday evening, we drove out to an observatory in the hills outside the city. The road was winding, but she drove with a steady hand. By the time we arrived, dusk was settling, and the first few stars were appearing in the sky. "Not many people know about this place," she said, leading me to the viewing platform. "My father used to bring me here." We looked through the large telescope at the rings of Saturn, and she pointed out the Big Dipper and Cassiopeia. The night air was cool, and I took off my jacket and draped it over her shoulders. "Are you cold?" I asked. She shook her head and leaned a little closer. "This is perfect." We sat side by side on a bench, looking up at the star-filled sky. Away from the city's light pollution, the galaxy was a breathtaking spectacle. "When I was a child, my father used to say that every star tells a story," she said softly. "Some are bright, some are dim, but they all travel their own paths until they find another star to orbit with." I turned to look at her. In the starlight, she was hauntingly beautiful. "Have you found yours?" She didn't answer directly. Instead, she pointed at the sky. "Look, a shooting star." A silver streak cut across the darkness and vanished. We both made a wish, then looked at each other and smiled. "What did you wish for?" she asked. "If I tell you, it won't come true," I teased. "What about you?" She looked up at the stars, her gaze distant. "I wish that I wouldn't regret certain changes." I took her hand. "Some changes are worth the risk." She didn't pull her hand away. Instead, her fingers laced with mine, our palms pressed together, sharing warmth, our heartbeats seeming to sync in the quiet of the night. Another meteor streaked across the sky. "This time," she whispered, "I wish that this moment could last a little longer." I couldn't hold back any longer. I turned to face her. "Victoria, I know there are a million reasons why we shouldn't. Our age, our positions, our pasts. But none of that matters. All that matters is that my heart beats faster when I see you, that I miss you when you're gone, and that the thought of you makes me smile." She listened silently, her eyes reflecting the starlight. "I don't care what anyone else thinks, and I don't care how hard it might be," I said, taking a deep breath. "I just need to know, do you feel the same way?" The gentle breeze carried the scent of distant wildflowers. We were so close I could feel her breath on my skin. She slowly raised her hand and cupped my cheek. "Liam, do you have any idea how much you've knocked my entire world off its axis?" Her touch was cool, but it felt like fire. I kept fighting it, she continued softly, telling myself it was wrong, inappropriate. "But when you were in Singapore, I found myself counting the days until I heard from you. When you came back, I made up every excuse I could to keep you by my side. And when you were taking care of me in the hospital, She stopped, her eyes shimmering. "You what?" I prompted. "I was afraid of losing you," she finally admitted. "Afraid of going back to a life that was just work. Afraid that I would wake up and find that all of this had just been a dream." I couldn't stop myself. I leaned in and kissed her. Her lips were soft and warm, with a hint of mint. She was surprised at first, but then she melted into the kiss, her fingers tangling in my hair. It wasn't a passionate, desperate kiss. It was gentle and deep, as endless as the stars above us. When we finally pulled apart, we rested our foreheads together, our breath mingling in the cool night air. "This isn't a dream," I whispered. "I'm real, and this is real." Her eyes were wet, but she was smiling. "You know, company policy prohibits office romances." I smiled back. Shouldn't the CEO lead by example and break the rules? She pretended to consider it. Perhaps the policy needs to be revised. We kissed again, this time with more passion, more certainty. Under the vast, starry sky, we held each other, two separate orbits finally colliding into one. On the way back, she rested her head on my shoulder. At a red light, I leaned over and gently kissed the top of her head. I saw that. she murmured, her eyes still closed, a smile playing on her lips. Next time, aim here. She pointed her mouth. I laughed, a feeling of pure, unadulterated happiness swelling inside me. Back at her apartment, we lingered at the door. Want to come in for a coffee? She asked, a playful glint in her eye. I feigned a frown. Ms. Vance, is this an abuse of power? She pulled me inside and pressed me against the wall. Then let me abuse my power. That night, we sat by the floor-to-ceiling windows, drinking wine and talking about everything and nothing. She told me about the early days of her company. I told her about my college pranks. We were like old friends and new lovers all at once. In the early hours of the morning, she fell asleep in my arms. I gently carried her to her bedroom. As I was tucking her in, she sleepily grabbed my hand. Don't go. So I sat by her bed and watched her sleep until the first rays of dawn broke through the curtains. We spent Sunday just being together, reveling in the quiet domesticity. She attempted to make lunch while I supervised, or rather, prevented her from burning down the kitchen. In the afternoon, we curled up on a couch to watch a movie. When the couple on screen kissed, she turned to me. Will you regret this? Being with someone older, more complicated? I looked at her seriously. The only thing I regret is not telling you how I felt sooner. She snuggled back into my arms, our fingers intertwined. Liam, promise me something. Anything. Never treat me differently because of who I am or how old I am, she said softly. Love me, get angry with me, cherish me, like you would any other woman. Okay. I held her tighter. I promise. But you have to promise me something too. Stop trying to be strong all the time. Let yourself lean on me. She looked up and kissed my chin. Deal. As the sun began to set, we stood on the terrace and watched the sky turn brilliant shades of orange and pink. She leaned back against my chest, my chin resting on the top of her head. It might be a little rough at the office on Monday, she said quietly. People will talk. Some might even disapprove. I turned her around to face me. As long as we face it together, there's nothing to be afraid of. She smiled and nodded, her eyes full of trust. Night fell, and the city began to sparkle. We kissed again under the emerging stars, a slow, deliberate kiss that felt like a vow. On Monday morning, we walked into the Stellar Media building together. As everyone stared, she held her head high, her arm linked confidently with mine. In the elevator, she hit the emergency stop button. Last chance, she said, half joking. It's not too late to back out. I pulled her into my arms and answered her with a kiss. When the elevator doors opened on her floor, we were holding hands, smiling at each other. In that moment, I knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, we would face them together. Because some love stories, once they begin, are meant to last forever. And ours was just getting started.